Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sustain Center for Sustainability Management. My name is Vasu. I'm a project manager and senior researchers here. Today, we are delighted to welcome Dr. Daniel McFarlane from the School of Global Studies, Thammasat University, to be sharing with us about social sustainability as a marketing strategy. So, without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Daniel McFarlane.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see so many people turn up to an event like this. Before we get into it, I'd just like to get a bit of an idea about who's in the room, so who I know who I'm talking to. So, is it possible we can just sort of quickly go around and everyone just sort of mention their name and where they come from or sort of work background?
I'm working at Central Group in marketing department.
Great.
I run a small business. We help students design their career. And here I was like CEO for Season Lab.
Okay, cool.
I'm Morgan, and I'm launching a global educative farm.
Excellent. Nice to meet you. Okay, great.
I am actually studying a master's degree in Oxford, UK.
Okay, cool.
My name is Heinz. I'm the former CEO of Untitled.
Okay, excellent.
My name is Vanessa and I work for Budagasa Archive.
My name is Diana. I work for the American Chamber of Commerce.
My name is Nikki. I run an organization called in Asia that promotes acceleration in Asia.
Good morning. My name is Hosky. I came from Chonburi Chapter, and I used to run Thailand investment. I German Thank you.
My name is Dr. and I'm running a small engineering company here in Thailand.
My name is Ariana and I'm lecturer at the University of National College.
I'm Shirley, same, come from the same university.
Okay.
So we have from I have to work in the functional team.
I'm Teresa, I'm teaching in finance and corporate sustainability.
Okay, nice, great. So we've got a nice sort of mix of people. Some from marketing backgrounds, small business owners, some people from a managerial background. It's great to see some academics here as well. So a little bit about me. Okay, I'm from Australia, but I've spent the last 18 years now in Asia, in Japan, Taiwan, here in Thailand, and also a couple of years in Cambodia where I did my research for my PhD. My professional background is quite varied. Despite my age, I've worked in export marketing, telecommunications sector, I've worked in consumer research, and most recently in database marketing strategy consulting. My education, so I have a doctorate in philosophy from the Australian National University, and in doing that doctoral degree, I specialised in anthropology, a bit of sociology, an element of political science. And my focus was on the marketing and consumption of mobile networks. Okay. So I've got a particular research interest, which I developed during that research period, and I've sustained that going as well. So that is, what's the impact of marketing? What's the social impact of marketing? When I say that, I'm not interested so much in how do we change the world through marketing, but just what is the consequence of regular marketing. And in that, I take a particular interest in the social construction of markets, which is what I'm really going to talk a lot about today. And I have this other interest, which I kind of combine, which is the social impact of technology, especially new media and digital platforms. So I'm currently engaged in a large research project around social media usage in Thailand, especially usage of Line. So I might plug that a little bit later in the talk. Okay, so when I say that I'm studying anthropology and bring an anthropological view to things, sometimes people find that a little bit confusing. So I'm going to try to explain that, and I find Yuval Harari be really useful. Who here's read Sapiens or Homo Deus? Anyone? No? Okay, well great. I really recommend his work. Yuval Harari gives a really simple way of explaining sort of how humans are just different from the rest of the animal world. And that's what an anthropologist is really interested in such that we study humans. Okay, objective reality. This is the first layer of reality that Harari explains. Now this is a layer of reality where this is kind of about the physical world. So when we feel something is cold, feel something is hot, it's an objective reality. We sense snow, we feel the wind, we feel so physical elements. So all animals are capable of feeling these elements. So we share these with chimps, with dogs, and most animals, all animals. Okay, and then there's another layer of reality, so a psychologist would give a lot of attention to this. And so do marketers. And that is the subjective reality, which is the internal feelings we experience. So things like happiness, anxiety, stress, nervousness, these are things that all animals feel. Anyone who's had a dog knows that a dog feels nervous sometimes, feels angry, can feel great happiness too. So we share this kind of reality with the rest of the animal world. But then there's a third layer of reality, which is fictitious reality. And this is only a layer of reality that humans experience. And we're able to experience this reality because we've developed great language skills. So we're able to create stories. We create all sorts of stories. We create stories about gods, religions, monarchies, and so forth. These stories enable us to cooperate and achieve great things. Okay? And so we also create stories about commercial world. We create stories about money. Okay? And the fact that everyone in the world believes in money means that we're able to have this global economic system. Okay. And we also create stories about markets. We create stories about how we go about doing marketing, which is what I'm going to try and talk about. So this fictitious reality, I think it's worth keeping in mind, is very powerful. It enables us to do great things. However, it's also probably our worst enemy. It causes all sorts of problems. Things about ethnic differences, religious wars, and so forth. All come out of this fictitious reality. Okay, so now I want to try and make a connection between this and this relationship between social sustainability and marketing. You don't have to explain what is marketing. I think we've all got some sense of what it is. But social sustainability is a really difficult concept. It's probably the most ill-defined concept in the whole social sustainability, social responsibility discourse. So I just wonder what we think in this group, what we think is social sustainability. I'll try and make it a bit easier. I think a way of thinking about social sustainability is to ask, what do we think is a sustainable society? What do we think is a society? What are the characteristics of a society that we think is sustainable in the long run? Okay, so that's really on an environmental level. Okay, so which is the tendency when we think about sustainability, is to think about environmental sustainability. How do we sort of protect the planet in the long run? So I'm trying to think more about what are the elements of society? How does society organize? in a sustainable way. Anybody?
The resources are replenished.
Sorry?
The resources that we are consuming, they are being replaced or replenished somehow.
Okay, so this again is around the sustainability of the planet and resources. The
So
physical.
those could be financial resources, human resources.
Okay.
It has to be inclusive.
Inclusive, okay. Why do you think inclusivity is important?
Well, if you're marginalizing some people, you will have all kinds of problems.
All sorts of problems, right? But you get conflict in the end. The society stops cooperating and working together. Okay. Maybe you could say, a lot of problems in the world, in somewhat in Southeast Asia, a lot of the problems we face here are around elements of inclusivity and exclusivity, where you have strong social divisions. And they erupt in political conflict of all sorts. This is sustainable. Okay, so I'm going to jump and on that note, talk a little bit about sustainability development goals, because they give an indication of what kind of world is sustainable, based on the UNDP. I've just circled a few. No poverty. I think most people think that's a given. So a prosperous society where people are not suffering in poverty. And then we have gender equality. It's an important one. Innovation and infrastructure. I circle that because I think it has a close relationship with how we think about marketing, especially the marketing of essential goods and services. Reduced inequalities, again, which is very closely related to this issue of inclusivity. Okay, so these are the way these ideas are explained by the UNDP. Okay, poverty is more than a lack of income and resources to ensure a sustainable livelihood. It manifests itself, it has manifestations include hunger, malnutrition, limited access to education, and other basic services. Social discrimination and exclusion, as well as the lack of participation in decision making. These are all forms of drivers of poverty. Economic growth must be inclusive, promote sustainable jobs and promote equality. Okay, so prosperity, economic growth isn't going to drive a sustainable future unless it's inclusive. It doesn't have these elements of social discrimination. Okay, again, gender equality is not only a fundamental right, but a necessary foundation for a peaceful, prosperous, and sustainable world. Industry and infrastructure should be inclusive. Inclusive and sustainable industrial development is a primary source of income generation. Allows rapid and sustained increases in living standards for all people and provides technological solutions to environmentally sound industrialization. Again, infrastructure should be inclusive. Reduced inequalities. While income inequalities between countries may have been reduced, inequality within countries has risen. And we see this a lot in this part of the world. There is growing consensus that economic growth is not sufficient to reduce poverty. It has to be inclusive. If it's not inclusive. Okay. So there are it should include these three dimensions of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental. So my focus is really today on the aspects of economic and social inequality and how they can be inclusive. So, what is a sustainable society? Okay, there are many elements, and we could go into all the environmental elements as well. But a sustainable society, which I'm going to present here, is one which is prosperous. Okay? It produces enough growth for everyone to take people out of poverty so they're not suffering from those stresses. It's also a rather equal society. It may not be perfectly equal, but it's sufficiently equal that it's not producing conflict. And to have that, you need to be needs to be inclusive. So it needs to have an element of inclusivity. Now, I've added another element here, which is something which the UNDP doesn't discuss very much. But aspects of these international organizations we'll talk about a lot is something called social capital. I'm not a great fan of the term, but it's about the social relationships we have. The fact that we can trust each other, work together. So I'm going to say things that enable family and community connection. So the social and cultural, economic arrangements that enable us to cooperate in a cohesive, harmonious way. And inclusivity is an important part of that. Now, I emphasize this, and I've got back to this idea about this fictitious reality. Okay. If we're going to choose between the chimp on the left, and Joey, or the man with a plan on the right, who's going to survive on the island, the deserted island? The chimp's going to survive, okay. Of course. Okay. Now, in reality, if you put 5 chimps together and 5 humans together, who's going to win a battle and survive? The chimps will still win. However, if you put 1,000 humans together and 1,000 chimps, the humans will always win. Because we have a capacity to cooperate in very large numbers, much bigger than any kind of animal world can do. So it's our capacity to cooperate, work together, which is our greatest strength. So what does marketing have to do with all of this in creating a sustainable society? Now, when I raise these kind of questions, people in marketing, they tell me they're just responding to the market. Okay? They're following their research. They're following the statistics. They're doing their marketing based on what they know the market is. So it's not their responsibility or their fault that what they're doing might be causing social problems. Would you agree with that? Is that the sort of the sense that you get from if you're involved in marketing? Or from people that you know who's involved in it? Just responding to the market.
Marketing is also about creating markets.
Exactly, yes.
It's not only response.
It's very much a creation. I agree. It's a creation process. And sometimes marketers or people in business don't always acknowledge their activity or their agency in creating markets. Okay, so, that's why I emphasize markets are socially constructed, at least partially or greatly socially constructed. And what marketers do, and I'm not having a go at marketers saying this, it's important to be aware of the process. Marketers project onto society their own preconceived versions of the market, or what the market will be, or what they think the future will be. And they also project an idea of society. So in any market construction is also social structure. So I've been quite happy in recent times that I don't feel so alone in making this claim, because Unilever has been making great strides in illuminating this fact. Okay, so Unilever they've been doing lots of things in the area of social sustainability. But one thing I'm going to focus on is this gender equality research they conducted. Now they, based on this research they conducted over several years into their own brands and into the marketing of their own products, they discovered that their own advertisements were overwhelmingly showing women in secondary or service roles. Just 3% of ads were featuring women in managerial and professional roles. Okay. And when they surveyed women, they found that almost all women, 9%, felt that they were represented as sex symbols in the Unilever ads. Almost 30% said that the advertisements show women as perceived by men, not from their own perspective. 40% didn't identify with the portrayal of women in the advertisements. 7 in 10 women and girls believed that the media and the advertising was projecting an unrealistic standard of beauty that most of them couldn't live up to. Now, once they realized this, Unilever then have engaged in what they call a Unilever unstereotype campaign, which is a nice word. Unstereotyping. So, and this, what this encompasses, or what this stands for, is that Unilever is now envisaging a world which every woman can create the kind of life she wishes to lead, unconstrained by harmful norms and stereotypes. Unilever realized that they were part of this problem. They were creating these harmful norms and stereotypes and projecting them onto society through the kind of innocent field of marketing. So, this is Unilever's revelation based on this research. They had been reinforcing gender stereotypes. But they also, they realized they were not serving the interests of their own customers. So there was this disconnect between the stereotypes they were projecting and what their customers really saw, the society their customers wanted to create, and the society they wanted to live in. So this wouldn't be good for business, and it wouldn't be good for the long-term sustainability of society and their customers. Okay. So how did Unilever get to this point? Okay, and I describe this, probably Unilever won't describe it like this, but I call it critical reflexivity, and it's a term we use a lot in social science. It's about turning the questions you ask back onto yourself. Okay? Asking yourself how you are seeing the world and what could be the problem with that version of the world that you're seeing. So, through this, they re-examined their values. And Holman, the CEO of Unilever, is very courageous in taking this movement forward of Unilever challenging their own values and sort of projecting those values back into the way they conduct their business. And part of that was questioning their impact. Okay, they do a lot in terms of their value chains now, but they're also doing it in terms of how they market their products. What's the impact of that process? Part of that questioning was challenging the stereotypes and narratives, the fictitious stories that they use to understand the world, the narratives they use to understand customers, and the stereotypes they were projecting onto society. So, I call this, what Unilever has gone about doing, they've engaged in trying to understand, I call the how factor. That the how factor is how we understand society determines how we engage with society. So the models we use to think about society are reflexive. They come out and they determine what kind of society we produce. So, and that goes the same for markets. How we understand a market determines, or a future market will determine how we construct that market, how we shape that market. So both social and market are somewhat reflexive. That is, they're somewhat a mirror image of how we think about the market, or how we think about society. So, reality is a product of how we see and how we think. So when we get to the end of the talk, we have time to go through a bit of an exercise in thinking about how we actually see the world, how we see markets, see things like innovation, social change. Okay. There are, I understand, there's not too many people directly involved in marketing here, but I think we can all imagine the process of thinking about a market from a conventional marketer's perspective. Okay. So I'd just like to think about that for a few minutes. If you're not involved in marketing yourself, or you don't have a product or service that you're selling, maybe you can just try to imagine one. Okay? And think about what is your target market. For a given product or service, what is your target market? Now, what are the parameters? What are the means of classification? Means of classification are the models we use to understand a market. We use, and in this we're going to include and probably exclude some customers. So I'm just, anyone who's studying marketing could easily throw some around. So what are some of the kind of modes of classification?
Age.
Age, okay, great. Gender. Income.
Level of education.
Sorry?
Level of education qualifications.
Yep.
Geography.
Okay. You've all hit all the ones I wanted. Any other ones?
Lifestyle.
Okay, very common one, very hard to define though. But yes, we do use lifestyle.
Behavior.
Sorry?
Behavior.
Behavioral segmentation, yeah. I always find it difficult to segment lifestyle and behavior. Any others?
Disposable income.
Sorry?
Disposable income.
Disposable income, right. Okay, which is kind of
Pretty important.
Yeah.
Disposable.
very, but again, I'll come to this later. Why these ideas, disposable income in general, very hard to identify. Lifestyle. Again, very hard to pinpoint. Sorry?
Geographic.
Geography, okay. Okay, so we've got age, geography, gender, income, disposable income, lifestyle, behavior. Good. So using some of these, if you imagine a product, what market might you identify? Has anyone got a product that they are currently marketing? All right. So a lot of you are in education, so you might be focused on the youth market, I assume. Okay, so this is an easy one to. Age is a really easy one to work with. Okay. So I started exploring a lot of these modes of classification. And it's become sort of the heart of my PhD research. How these things, which you've all mentioned now, how they influence how we construct the market for mobile technology, mobile phones. So I did this research back in 2010, 2012, and the way I did it was through ethnography. So it's qualitative research. Ethnography is participant observation. It's the core methodology of an anthropologist. So that means sort of living among people who you were studying, experiencing their lives, and it should be very long term, hence 2010 to 2012. Should at least be 1 year in the field living with people. Okay, now what was different about my research is, so I actually began with an idea that I would follow the tradition of a lot of people that were studying new media, mobile phones. There's been a lot of great studies around the world because people are accessing telecommunications for the first time in countries like South in the Caribbean, Africa, and India, Southeast Asia. So I was going to study how mobile phones were changing society in Cambodia. That was my intention, which I did end up doing to some extent. So half of my studies was about that. But I also got caught up in doing something else, which was studying consumer research. So I'll get in this, I'll come into this later, but early on while I was in Cambodia, I just arrived, and I was invited to join a market research company, observe some research they were doing for a big new mobile phone, a mobile phone company that existed in the market for a long time. I think I can safely say it was AIS's sister company. Okay. It's now bankrupt. Okay. There's a good reason for it becoming bankrupt, which is what I'm going to explain. And it was about how we use these modes of classification. Okay. So this company, they were really struggling at the time because they were facing a lot of competition from a lot of new companies. So the market was growing really fast. That's why I chose Cambodia. The time that I started doing research, so I enrolled to do my PhD in 2009. At that point, 25% of the population, only 25% of the population had a mobile phone. And we have to think, Cambodia really had no landlines. I think there might have been 10,000 landlines at the time. Okay, so there was a huge leap forward going on. People were going from nothing to being fully engaged in the digital economy. So, growth rate, 45 to 50%, seems really high, but that was quite normal. Most of the African countries experience the same kind of growth rates. There are certain countries at the moment which are experiencing much faster growth rates. Myanmar, for example, it's growing at a faster rate even. Okay, it was also really competitive. If anyone's worked in Cambodia, you might know that the government lets in any companies that is willing to pay some money on the table. Okay, so anyone with a bit of cash was willing to play the game, the government, Hun Sen's game, they could get a mobile phone license, network license. So you had 9 companies. Okay, actually there was more like 14 companies with the license, but 9 got off the ground and built independent networks. Thailand, there are only 3, which is sensible. There were 9 networks, and most of them, or all of them, were transnational corporations of some kind. So they were coming from Russia, Vimpelcom, huge Russian telecommunications company. They invested in Cambodia, also in Vietnam. Companies from the Middle East were there. Telenor never entered Cambodia. I think because Telenor has certain standards. And standards around how they engage with governments. So the fact that there was no regulatory conditions, there was no transparency about how you got a license, made it a troublesome market for them to get involved in. Okay. Telenor is a good, interesting company. Okay, so we'll go on. And I was fascinated with this because mobile phones were portrayed as tools of grassroots development. I was interested in how could technology changed society from the grassroots. I was also interested, but not so much in the beginning, I was interested in how mobile phone companies were being treated as exemplary figures of market-driven development through the markets. And so economists and people like C.K. Prahlad use mobile phone companies as examples of how sort of bottom of the pyramid marketing business could change society. So this is what the economists explained about the mobile phone industry. Now they had a lot of articles about mobile phones, mobile technology, how it was going to transform the world. So this is one of the statements they made back in 2005. Promoting their spread requires no aid payments or charity handouts. Handset makers like Nokia, acting in their own interest, made to produce low-cost phones for what they now regard as a promising new market. Mobile operators across the developing world would love to sign up millions of new customers. So I accepted this idea. I accepted the idea that they were just going to try and reach out to everybody. And society would be transformed through this process. But as I went forward, I realized the economists were somewhat wrong, or at least they gave a false impression of how the market really worked. Okay, now there's a lot of evidence now that the rollout of telecommunications infrastructure correlates with growing inequalities. Because the concentration of access is in areas of high income areas. And that research goes back to 2002, but that's consistent. It's gone forward. So in African countries, which has been, so mobile phones are supposed to change African society completely, which it would have, but it's also led to much greater inequality in African societies. Phones disproportionately are owned and used by privileged sections of society across the board in Africa. So this is from Ghana, unequal access to teleservices, especially mobile communication in Ghana, has been marginalized. So marginalized is the remote and the poor relative to the rich. So inequalities which existed before are now being accentuated through the rollout, through the marketing and distribution of mobile phones and mobile networks. The same thing happened in Cambodia. Huge divides in Cambodia. The rural-urban divide. Okay, so in Cambodia they call someone from the city a Nek Krong, city person, and people from rural areas are called Nek Srai, rice farm, a rice person. And this divide has been a huge problem in Cambodian society, going back a long time. So we probably all know about what happened in the 1970s. 1970s, revolution, Khmer Rouge. There was genocide. That genocide was the result of this conflict between urban and rural people. Now you see this same conflict is still alive in Cambodia today. But it was manifesting itself in the distribution of access to mobile phones. So in the city, 93% of Phnom Penh households, they had a mobile phone. Okay, but only 35% of households in rural areas had a mobile phone. It's a huge difference. You have households with no telecommunications access at all. So 65% of people living in rural areas, no access to personal access to telecommunications. So if we were going to, so the economists which made these predictions, companies were going to go out and service the poor, this this wasn't coming through in statistics, okay? Especially in Cambodia. Things changed, however. So, this market, which was being constructed by companies, was supporting prosperity and economic and growth in the urban population, mainly in Phnom Penh, okay, which is most of the population, the urban population lives. Maybe a little bit in places like Battambang, Siem Reap, a little bit. Okay. But the rural population was being left behind. So there was, in the foundation of the market was based on exclusivity, which is the opposite of what we were talking about, to inclusivity, which is the core of the foundation of a sustainable society. This is evident in consumer research. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about next is why. How did this come about? Okay? It wasn't just the market talking. How did they define and address this? They call it an addressable market. So one CEO said to me, this Cambodia is not the same as the Western market, developed market. Not everybody is part of the addressable market. So he was thinking from the beginning that this is an exclusive market. Mobile phones is an exclusive market. And a CMO also said, so our expected ARP is $5 per month. Now they never achieved that. Don't think they've even achieved that now. So that was their goal, to have all their customers spending $5 a month. That's not very much money. Okay? You have to have a very low income not to be able to afford $5 a month. So, their idea was most people in rural areas, they just can't afford that. $5 a month, 150 baht, that's not possible. So they were using income, clearly as an indicator of what the market was. But how did they come to that conclusion? That this large population could not afford $5 a month. Now then when you start to think about that, it gets much more complicated. Okay. So what I also want to explain is all these companies, they were coming from other parts of the world. Okay. They were coming, so we had CEOs, CMOs, they were coming from Europe, they were coming from Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, the company that I mentioned earlier, full of Thai executives, thought they knew everything about the marketing telecommunications. They didn't understand the Cambodian market. Okay. So what they did, and when you choose to invest in a country like Cambodia, you come from, say, Moscow or Amsterdam or Singapore, and you can invest anywhere in the world. How do you identify a country to invest in and choose to go somewhere? Now, you need certain ways to make, the world is a very large place. Okay? You need mechanisms to make parts of the world visible. Okay, so what we do, we need to engage in simplification. And simplification to make sense of the world, to make sense of any given market. And how we do that is we're going to go and use these sort of modes of segmentation to do that. We're going to segment the whole world basically. And we're going to use demographic statistics. Okay. Now Cambodia was visible on the global map because Cambodia has a very young population. People love entering markets with a young population that promises growth going forward into the future. Okay, Cambodia was also visible because the economy was growing rapidly. So you could easily see this. You know, it had growth rates in like China for a long time. Fastest growing market in Southeast Asia in the early 90s. Okay. Now you also might look at market penetration rates. 25% at one point. Much lower in an earlier period. Very fast growth rate. A lot of opportunity. So that made the country visible as a country you could invest in. Now what happens is, you take those same sort of modes of segmentation to make a country visible, and you transfer them, translate them to the local market, and use those same models to speak and to carve out the local market once you enter it. So this is what the CEOs, the CMOs did. They went about carving out the market based on how headquarters perceived the local market, how they understood the market. And it's very important, people who've worked in sort of global companies could probably speak to this to some extent, or maybe argue with it, is that sort of metrics and models of understanding the market, they need to be translatable. You need to be able to use a model which you can then talk to headquarters about, and they can understand. You can be all on the same page. This is useful for conducting international business. It can be very problematic for constructing a good local business. Okay, so these sort of models which are used to understand the market were then at a local level, they merged with what I call social subjectivities, sort of the prejudices and stereotypes of people working in these companies. And these people would then use cultural narratives, sort of fictitious stories about the population to understand it. And they would also focus on segments of individuals. A strong focus on marketing, understanding individuals. Where's that? Okay. Just conscious of time. I've been talking for 50 minutes. So I think I'll take a break, okay, before I go on. When I go on with, I'm going to talk about these models, okay? These models of understanding the market and how they reproduce and generate forms of exclusivity and generate forms of social arrangements which I do not think are sustainable or good for business. So can we just take 5 minutes break so I can have some water or coffee? I hope you had a break from my talking. As we move forward, I want to think about some of the models, the models of the mind that we use. And one of these models is, I think everyone would agree, it's very common in the marketing and business world, is to think in terms of pyramids. And this is one pyramid you think about. I'm going to come to another pyramid soon. The income pyramid is a very common one. We agree with that? You tend to think about society in terms of pyramid. Different societies, so this will look very different. Much stronger, middle income. Right. It won't look like a pyramid in a lot of developed countries. It won't look like a pyramid in Northern Europe. It won't look like a pyramid in Japan. But it does appear like a pyramid. You think about a pyramid maybe in Thailand. You might think about a pyramid certainly in Cambodia, people think about a pyramid. And that face at the bottom is very large. But when it comes to your question about social subjectivities, people involved in marketing or in any business making decisions about the development of a market, where do they sit in this pyramid? What do you think? Mostly they're going to probably they're going to be in one. Okay, yeah. The CEOs are probably in one. Then you'll have other people working in the companies who also shape what happens. So I work with a lot of people that were in middle management, working in a consumer research company. Where do they sit? They're probably tier 3, tier 2. And what they did, they brought their own way of thinking about the rest of society. They brought that into how they conducted the research. And so, who do you think was included in the market? Sorry? Two, three. Usually want to get the ones in there too. Right? And so, the people that are conducting the research, making market-defining decisions, they always tended to include themselves. Okay? But they generally excluded what I call the social other, the people that were the other of them, which is, so you come from an urban middle-class background in Phnom Penh, or in Bangkok, the social other is going to be your sort of working-class, rural other, okay? Living in the countryside. That's who you define as your opposite. So in sociology, we use this idea of battle. We create the world through binary relationships. There's two kinds: old, young, rich, poor, tall, short, so forth. And this is how we construct our sort of map of the world. And so urban-rural is a very strong way of defining, understanding the world. And so this idea was injected into consumer research, was injected into how we understand the market. So, what was the result of this? Okay, what happened was the market looked really homogeneous. Now, I was really shocked by this when I arrived in Cambodia, intending to go and research how mobile phones were changing rural society. Everyone in working for mobile phone companies involved in marketing, they would tell me, oh, but the market, everyone's the same. They all use mobile phones in the same way. This is not like another market. How is that possible? Certainly there are going to be large differences, especially given how socially divided the country is. Most mobile phone companies also concentrate on the youth market, so they're using demographic age as a way of defining the market. And this comes from this idea about it being a very youthful market. Again, they focused on the urban areas. And they certainly didn't talk about the remote, which is an idea it took me a very long time to understand what that meant. Okay, the market was certainly middle class. And they all had middle class occupations. So, this is when I first went out, and I ended up following a lot of different research. And the first time I went and looked at how research was being done, I couldn't work out why everyone seemed the same. They actually did seem homogeneous. Because they used methods of including people in the research, which excluded people that had sort of low-class, rural, working-class occupations. So if you were a farmer, if you worked in a factory, if you were a labourer, you were not allowed or given the opportunity to participate in any research and have your voice known as a potential consumer of mobile phones. And the same thing, and so if you look at how people would be categorized, you get a long list of, you tick all sorts of boxes on all sorts of middle-class occupations. Say you work for the government, you're a small business owner, you work in a private company, blah, blah, blah. If you're a farmer, sometimes there was not even one box that you could tick. You just put into the box of other. Generally, they would just be excluded from the research. How could a farmer articulate their consumer choices? or the consumer preferences. This is the mindset. Because they were mostly considered uneducated. And again, they used education as a means of exclusion. So I saw lots of very strange research being conducted, gave a lot of attention. You could define yourself, you could say that you were doing your bachelor degree, about to graduate your bachelor degree, doing a master's, graduated from your master's, even doing your PhD. You could make that known on a consumer research survey. However, if you were only graduated from primary school, that was not an option, because people with that kind of low education would not be allowed to participate in the research. For me, I thought the most important thing that these companies needed to understand was rates of literacy. Cambodia has very high rates of literacy, and that is the greatest determinant of how you might engage with a company. Or how you might use a mobile phone is determined by how well you understand English, because most of the mobile phones at that time only had an English operating system, or how you could use read command. Is that what determined how you communicate to the customers? But that was considered rather irrelevant to the mobile phone companies. It was considered relevant to the consumer research firms, because they're not our addressable market. That was predefined, preconceived, and then implemented, and made to seem real and once it's seen in data and a PowerPoint, it seems like it's tangible information. So again, all companies, they love measurement. Everything now needs to be measured. And this creates problems as well, because everything needs to be identifiable in data. And if things are not shown in data, they don't exist. We can't make decisions based on things which cannot be represented by data. That's the idea. That creates a lot of problems. So, the market is, as I've been trying to push, is somewhat predefined. And so the consumer research which is conducted only serves to confirm what has already been predetermined. So, famous anthropologist of marketing described consumer research as merely a confirmatory ritual. And you see this across the board. Okay? But very rarely is research conducted in a way to challenge how a company already thinks about the market. There might be little tiny small questions that might sort of extend their knowledge a little bit. Mostly it's about defining or confirming what's already understood.
Why do you think that is?
I don't think people really want change, or people think, I don't think they think that they're seeing the world in a way which is any way wrong. Okay? They understand, they think their worldview is the accepted worldview.
But wouldn't companies that are usually driven by a quest for profit try to think a little bit outside of the box and say, maybe this segment of society doesn't have the purchasing power we need for our product, but let's see if we can devise a product that would fit their purchasing power?
You would think so. You would think so. That may happen to some extent. It's not what I've observed very much. So I think companies are also very risk adverse. So, and they also want to, there's also a sort of a dilution of responsibilities, especially in large companies. So they're more likely to follow the model of understanding the market which comes from headquarters. And that puts them in a more sort of safe position. But I'm going to challenge that perspective. So I was often given the role of analyzing the data and presenting the data, and I would always try to challenge the companies. Okay? They never like it. Never. Especially if it challenged the way the headquarters understood the market. And even when I had statistics, which were really, that we would produce statistics showing that most Cambodians watch TV, get all the information about mobile phones, watching TV commercials. How is this possible? This doesn't make any sense. Because if you just look at the rate of TV ownership in the country, it's not possible. Take that out of the paper. That's how we understand the market in Russia. Okay? It's consistent with how the people, how our managers, CEO understand. So leave it there. Don't question it. That's the kind of thing that I encounter quite regularly. Okay. So it's not designed to present an alternative view. Okay, now what's wrong with all this? Firstly, income is a really weak indicator of needs and preferences. Okay, so what happens, there's a lot of research now, especially around mobile phones, and I think mobile phones are just one example of many, showing that someone from a low income will disproportionately or allocate money quite different ways than someone from a middle income. Okay? So you can't say that 10% of income will go on to communication. For a low income person, that same 10% will apply for middle income. It doesn't work like that. Their needs are quite different, and the way they'll allocate the money is quite different. They also have quite different preferences. Income is not a very good indicator of personal preference. So in the sociology of consumption, we know there's been enormous amounts of work conducted, and I don't quite understand why it hasn't been taken on in sort of part of the normal mainstream marketing. Is that most of our preferences comes from how we have been socialized, how we've grown up. So in a fast-changing market like Cambodia, you've got a lot of, now in Phnom Penh even, a lot of very wealthy people. But they come from a background of poverty. And they still, while they might drive Range Rovers, they will still have a lot of the same preferences which they developed as they grew up. So income in that way is not a very good indicator. You see that a lot in Thailand too. Their preferences is not aligned with their income always. You can see people having somewhat, I would say, is somewhat maybe low-class tastes, but having very high income, and sometimes the opposite.
Most of the time it's the opposite.
Most of the time. Okay. So, the narratives and stereotypes about the society were just false. Plainly false. So one of the strongest narratives which was used was that the rural society was subsistent. And I heard even the research director saying this, I heard executives in mobile phone companies saying this, rural people are subsistent. And actually it's a common idea in a lot of the sociology of Cambodia, which is really, I find, difficult to accept. Well, when you go out to rural society, you see that they are, of course, not subsistent. So let's start. What does subsistent mean? What do we think when we say someone has a subsistent lifestyle? Pushed strongly in Thailand.
Doesn't it mean they don't use money, they grow all their own produce and consume that, and then their commerce is trade? No?
So excess, if they have excess product, more than they are able to consume themselves, they might trade in that. Okay, yes. So basically they're living off their own production. However, if you go out to rural society, this is not the case. Very rarely would you encounter village life, villagers who are actually producing product for themselves. they were all engaged in commerce. They were all engaged in producing product for the market, for trade. Okay, and actually, they shunned a subsistent lifestyle. You see this in Thailand. A lot of rural people are expected to live that kind of lifestyle, but that's not what they desire. They want to be engaged in the market. And through markets, they are engaged in society more broadly. Okay, and so yes, when we think about people as subsistence, they're isolated somewhat. They're not strongly engaged in the broader society because they're living in an isolated lifestyle on the land. But this Cambodian rural people were strongly engaged in the market, not just in trade, but through selling their labor, going to work in Thailand, going to work in Phnom Penh. And so they were strongly engaged in a cash, market-based economy. And that requires communication. And of course, communities are never homogeneous. Unless you live somewhere like Tonga or something, and you never leave that area, you might sort of have a sort of homogeneous world. Okay? But generally people live in communities which are very diverse. They're diverse in terms of occupations, they're diverse in terms of income. It's going to be rich and poor. And even in a rural society, community in Cambodia, you would have some very wealthy Cambodians and most of them some very poor. But they would be interacting constantly. Okay, you'll have all sorts of other, you'll also have strong differences in age. Communities are always made up of people of various age groups. So this focus, say, on just the youth market was somewhat getting wrong, getting the idea of what community is, presented in a way which young people only mix with each other. Of course that doesn't happen. Okay, and so mobile phones, many forms of communication, many forms of consumption are about crossing, about communicating. So even if it's not a mobile phone, we consume things to make signals to other people. Right? Communication is a process of consumption. The brands are a way of communicating things to other people in our communities. Most of that communication is about crossing segmentation divides. Okay? You might try to communicate with someone of a sort of wealthier socioeconomic condition. We might be communicating to someone, young people are communicating to their parents. That is the most important form of communication. Family communication is demographically diverse. And people will, if they're engaged in the market, the rural person, a lot of their communication will be to the city, to urban areas. So they're bridging that urban-rural divide as they communicate. So these models of segmentation were contrary or opposite to the models of community, and were opposite to the models of communication which was going on. And in that, a strong part of that was individualizing. When we do marketing, we tend to imagine a market of individuals. And I'm going to give an example of that. An alternative. Okay, we also rely on existing data. Which is, we know we have to use data, but what the problem is that when we use data, all we can see is the past. We cannot see how a market might change and what could be produced. What could the future market be will never really be revealed in data. Only if you're seeing strong trends. So if you use data, you tend to reinforce a pre-existing idea about what the market is. And I can say that as someone who's worked in database marketing. Doesn't open up opportunities for innovation very much. So this is another pyramid. We generally like pyramids. Yes, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Okay. Who's in their education, in their professional life, comes across this? Yeah? Most of you, okay. I find that really funny because I studied sociology and anthropology, and we never studied Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's common in psychology. I didn't study psychology. Okay, so yes, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, published in 1943. Not very relevant. Okay, so do you think it's helpful? I've just insinuated that I don't like it. You find it helpful, anyone?
It simplifies how you see people in different buckets.
Right,
You
right.
need to strive for a higher.
Right, okay. Again, it's a nice, simple model. It's easy to understand. So we, as people, we like these simple models to make sense of society. Now, do we correlate, make any association between this pyramid and another pyramid?
Might go along with the previous one with the income tier 1, 2, tier
Right, right. This is what I generally find. Most people make an association between this pyramid and the previous pyramid. So people at the bottom, the poor, they have mainly physiological needs. They need shelter. They need or they need food to live. Now, so the foundation of all the other needs are these needs. We need to satisfy these needs first. Which makes sense. It's pretty easy to accept that. I'm going to say that this is wrong. Now, I'll rely on someone else to make this argument. Matthew Lieberman, who is both a psychologist, a social behavioral scientist, and a neuroscientist. Okay, now, he argues that because all mammals require a caregiver, especially humans. Okay, infants cannot survive on their own. They need that social connection from day one. So our basic biology is built to a thirst for connection because it is linked to our most basic survival needs. So our need for connection is the bedrock upon which the other needs are built. Okay? Social needs are the foundation. So we need to move that one to the bottom. Now you'll find anyone who looks at studied sort of working class communities, poor communities, they focus on being social, building their social connections, probably much more than middle class, upper class communities, because they see social connection as a means to satisfy all other needs. This is, again, I think, built into our biology. And you can see, we're doing some research on the usage of Facebook and other social media. People of a low income level in Thailand will have far greater friends, social media connections, than people of a high income level. Might be surprising, maybe not. Okay? I explain that because they see social connections, even social media connections, as a medium to alleviate some of the other stresses in their life. Or medium to grow. Okay. Most of the research that I did was contrary to this idea. Well, so most of the research I observed was contrary to the idea that it's all about social connection. So I thought it was really strange because we were studying mobile phones, and mobile phones are all about connection. But the mobile phone companies didn't look at society in those sort of ways about social connection. They were focused on this idea of positioning. And those who study marketing will be very familiar with the idea of positioning. What position brands have in the mind of individuals, in the mind of consumers. And so you'll use a lot of different brand attributes and you'll study what position those different brand attributes hold in the position of individual consumers. So things like the most common sort of metric in branding is top of mind recall. Top of mind, okay? That's about trying to gauge where the brand sits in people's minds. So the research director at this consumer research company, he would create all of these fantastic mind maps of Cambodian society. We're looking at the population, where different brands and how they'll position the mind of Cambodians. And all the attention to media, so advertising expenditure through TV, through radio, through print, through social media now, is all geared around driving positioning in the mind of individuals. Okay. So what they'll do is they'll try to, marketers will compare the expenditure you put into advertising with the return on positioning. Those two things are closely monitored. They're key KPIs of any marketing organization. Now, I think this, again, is problematic. Or it's not giving the full picture. Okay. Now, I'm going to jump now and come back to that. But let's think about any given community. We think in terms of individuals, and we think in terms of those metrics, or those sort of ways of classifying consumers, we'll come up with, okay, we've got to come up with this. This is sort of a very simple map. Not an actual map, but something that looks a little bit like a rural community that I studied in Cambodia. And what you have is a main road, usually a national road, going through the center of a district. A district I would class as a rural community. Through that center, you have these urban centers in the middle, along the main road. At one point, the center of the district, usually in the center of the district, you'll have a major market. And you have lots of other sort of points of social interaction. Mainly markets, the fundamental, the center of the community is the market. Which is contrary to this idea of rural people being subsistent, when you put the market at the center. And you might have some temples, you might have a small source of medicals, health centers, and so on. You might have some administrative centers, probably have a bank, a microfinance center, several microfinance places in Cambodia. A small hospital, a school.
Bar.
Sorry?
Bar.
Yeah, you'll have some restaurants. Sort of, there's a bamboo bar of some sort, yeah. Karaoke. You'll have some cafes where the guys can go and watch Thai boxing on the weekend and gamble, things like that. Okay. And then you'll come out and you have lots of villages, so scattered out in the district. Okay. So I work on both sides of this community, on a village in the far south and the far north. So I got to see this, how they were connected to the center. Now, when you go forth and we develop, so this is a community really, it looks like this. So when a mobile phone operator or any distribution, sort of, any kind of planning of product distribution occurs, will work a bit like this, okay? they'll develop distribution in the center. Because they want to, this is where the money is, of course. This is where they think people with money exist. So you get coverage right through the middle. What is this? You've actually just created what is already a somewhat unequal society and made it much more unequal. Because you're allowing these people in the center to be much more active in the rest of the economy, and you are exacerbating the differences with the rest of it. And this happens it's not just about mobile phones, but many other things. Okay. So, what happened was, while I was doing research, so this isn't exactly what really happened. I'm giving you a picture of what was the reality before or as it was changing. Because most of the operators, most of the companies, you could say 8 of the 9, did this. The one company, they had a whole different way of thinking about the market. And that was in this community-based approach. Thinking about how is Cambodian society structured and building their distribution and coverage based on this community model. Not based on those kind of demographic income classifying models that we talked about. Okay. This company is Viettel. Viettel, now they are a very interesting business. Viettel is, you get it probably from the name, Vietnamese company, owned by the Vietnamese military. Okay. And they brought with them a kind of, you could say, even a Maoist or Vietnamese communist approach to marketing.
Everybody equal.
Yes. And amazingly, it's been very successful. Okay. So, their model was rural first. That doesn't mean they excluded the urban centre. They just didn't make a lot of fanfare in the city centres. So if you were a person living in Phnom Penh, working for a mobile phone company, you would think, what's McFarlane? They're not doing anything. Viettel. They're not putting a lot of money into TV, into radio, into print media, so they couldn't see what they were doing. Okay, and this is a picture of a McFarlane, because that's a brand, it just means friend phone in Khmer. And that is a picture from one of the Thammasat Lake. So even on the Thammasat Lake, where you have a lot of floating villages, they will build coverage and they will build distribution centers. So what they did, going back to that market, at the middle of every district, in the middle of what the market community, they built a distribution office. And so made sure that they were at the center of every community. And they ran distribution or marketing campaigns through every single village. They had a policy that they would market their product to every single household in Cambodia. Okay, so they focused their distribution on family and community. So rather than thinking about individuals, they thought about community units, the basic unit being the family. So their most successful product was selling these what they call family kits. So which were sets of SIM cards. So you could sell maybe 4 or 5 SIM cards to one family. Rather than focusing on young people, they focused on parents, heads of households, who then redistributed those SIM cards to their children. And once a family was using the network, very hard to go to another network. The family is the most cohesive long-running consumption unit you can have. So they experience very little churn, which the other operators had a big problem with because they were focusing on young people. The young people are constantly changing, and they don't stay young for that long.
Why do you think Vettel took this approach as opposed to the other companies?
I think they just had a very different way of thinking about society. Okay? They could see the potential of Cambodian society as they see it in many other countries. So they're very forward thinking, one thing, and they also have a holistic mindset. They look at how people are connected. So another example of this is they would insert the brands or the products into the patron-client gift relationships. So one of my research assistants, he was a university teacher. So he was approached at one point by the secretary of the director of the university because Viettel approached, they trained their staff to identify sort of sets of people and hierarchical relationships in communities. So they would approach someone like, say, a head of a school and said, please distribute. Here is a SIM card for you. Here is 3 months free calling. Please distribute these other 20 SIM cards to all your co-workers or all your staff. And so they would then he would distribute them to his staff. And it would be then, product would become embedded in the relationships the staff would have with their boss, basically. And so they'll become part of a gift relationship. And they would then be expected to reciprocate and show their gratitude in some way for using this product, using the gift they received. So that showed, I don't endorse that, I think that's quite manipulative and sort of taking advantage of the social system, but it's a reflection of how their sort of very deep understanding of how the society operates.
Thailand's been trying to do that once, like almost a decade ago, and it failed. Because it seems like the marketing promotions, sales promotions, why they have this kind of concept to let them all the whole family members to do the same SIM card from the same company.
Right,
And
right.
then finally the other company tried to fight back by using the same scheme, and
Right.
so fighting over the price for over the monthly.
Yeah.
So
I think so. It works in the beginning. So everyone else, so McFarlane became a market leader in these kind of practices. And they changed because they demonstrated how it could be done. Other companies followed, and you'll see that anyway. So most people are in business. People are much more. They generally won't follow consumers. They'll follow what other companies are doing. That is the biggest driver of their behavior.
Sorry, I have a question here. I know you kind of jokingly mentioned that maybe the difference is because this was a Vietnamese military, which maybe have some communist meanings, but don't you think that could be the reason for a more egalitarian view of society and for their different approach? Or maybe because the history of the country and that they haven't been exposed fully to this sort of capitalist market thinking, so that they were able to take a different approach.
Okay, so Viettel, again, it's a military-owned company, and it entered the Vietnamese market long after the mobile phone industry emerged. So they were a late entrant. So there were a lot of companies who were following the same kind of sort of models that we've been talking about, already operating in Vietnam. And so you would expect that maybe they would enter the market and follow that same process. So capitalism is very alive and well in Vietnam. So they were quite innovative in the fact they took a totally different approach to the market. I think because they have military background has made it easier for them in some regard. They can tap into a lot of resources which other companies cannot. But I also think it might be something in the mindset of the military strategists who trained in the approach of Vietnam and also in China. So you see a lot of companies in China, Huawei is a great example, that have followed a very similar model. Huawei has, again, military background. Their owner is trained in the Red Army, quite high ranking at one point, then went into be the founder of Huawei. And what he did, or what Huawei has done, is the same kind of approach. This sort of Maoist idea, military idea, is take the countryside and surround the city. Once you take the countryside, you can take the city.
Is it the Vietnamese company doing the market in Cambodia or
Yes,
is it in Vietnam?
yes, everywhere. So they started in Vietnam, they moved to Cambodia, to Laos, and now they're global.
So they did the same to
They've done this, they've used the same business model everywhere they've gone. Okay. So again, I think they are very future oriented. They weren't focusing on their approach was not based on what the market was showing them to be. They were constructing a whole new market. And that took vision, it took a lot of risk too. But probably in their mind that wasn't a risk because they understood the market in Vietnam so well and they understood that Cambodia was really identical.
Don't they have any drawback because of the history during the war? Because Vietnamese actually invaded Cambodia.
Sure. The Vietnamese military was a colonizer for 10 years.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of anti-Vietnamese sentiment in Vietnam. Most people don't know this background. And at the end of the day, if it's the product that's serving their interest, they seem to ignore that fact. But I met lots of people who refused to use McFarlane because of this Vietnamese background. Especially people in the city. They were very reluctant. And there was a lot of conspiracy theories, which is somewhat maybe legitimate, that this was a medium of
Intelligence.
yes, intelligence, spying on. So they had Hun Sen. He made everyone in the army, encouraged everyone in the Cambodian military and government to switch to McFarlane. Okay, which would be somewhat ironic, having your neighboring military operating your telecommunications network. Okay, but that just goes to show how close they are. And also, his daughter is a shareholder. Okay, so when I talk about McFarlane to people in Phnom Penh, they always point out this fact. But I don't think it is. It's very legitimate and has a big impact on the political economy in Cambodia. But it doesn't dilute the fact that they had a very good marketing model. And a very different way of thinking about the market. Okay. And it's produced amazing results, far away from their sphere of political influence. Okay, so they're going into the Caribbean. So they've taken over this region around Thailand. They've got 40% more than 40% market share in Vietnam, 46% in Cambodia. Under the Unitel in Laos, they have 47%. Well, then the other markets they went into soon after they've been successful in, they went to Haiti, which is their first step, which is a very interesting choice. And they have 30% of the market there. Mozambique, they've been very successful. And they've really transformed the Mozambique economy through bringing mobile access to a lot of communities which were sort of threatened by civil war for a long time. And other companies would just not go to. So they get a lot of praise. And they moved into Burundi, Cameroon, Tanzania now. And they've made a big play in Myanmar. So wait and see what happens there. Okay? Telenor is under threat.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the thing is, maybe they brought about some change or progress. At the same time, did that not create kind of divide that if I'm using Viettel's McFarlane, for example, that makes me Loso or Banno or something like that?
I found, yeah, there's a little bit of that, but I found it was much more inclusive than that. Most people of a whole range of socioeconomic positions were using McFarlane. From city people to rural people, from the rich to the poor. You might sense a little bit of that in the city only, that kind of divide. Okay, so I'm just going to present here a different way of thinking about positioning. It's such a kind of core idea of marketing. McFarlane really didn't focus on this, that sort of focus on the individual through mainstream media. They tried to put themselves in between as a glue or a link between people. And as someone from a sort of the economic anthropology background, this is the way we think about consumption. We think commodities and brands are purely links and chains between people, the way they communicate with each other. So McFarlane somewhat did this. They put themselves in between people, made themselves this sort of glue to keep people together. So I would like to propose for business to think about a different kind of KPI. And that is the frequency brands appear not in the mind, but in social relationships. And we should be looking at the strength of the brand's position in those relationships. So, if a brand was positioned in a family, for example, had a strong position in a family, that would indicate very strong position in community, position in relationships. Because community is the strongest kind of unit of community there is. Okay. So I'm going to just sort of plug some of my own research that I've been doing this year. I'm going to do a line versus Facebook comparison. Okay? Which one, based on that metric, would be the most successful business, or would be the most sustainable business in the long run? And this is just for Thailand. So this is research I've conducted with a market research agency, the Market Buzz. It's a mobile phone-based research agency. And we researched 2,000 participants. It's quite a large-scale project across Thailand and across all socioeconomic, demographic backgrounds. We've got a very well-balanced research project. We found that 85% of Thai smartphone users engage with Line every day. So this is usually a great indicator of engagement. Only 74% use Facebook daily. Now, that's not the main thing. 70% of Thai smartphone users said they use Line the most to keep in touch with family. Well, only 12% said they use Facebook. Only 9% said they use FB Messenger. And so what we see then, Line is strongly embedded in family connections. Also friendship, not as high as 70%, but friendship, peer group communication is very high. Workplace communication, very high for Line. So this leads to this statistics where 46% of Thais, smartphone users, said Line was essential to their lives. And that links back to this idea that it was Line is sort of the medium of that community communication. Only 24% said Facebook was essential. Okay? Now Facebook, people have many more friends on Facebook than they do have with Line. Many more. But the relationships that count most are through Line. So if I was going to make a judgment about what is the most sustainable business in this market, it would be Line. Okay. Okay. Now, we're running out of time. I'd just like to point out, there's a lot of trends now growing towards this way of thinking. Of course, we know there's a lot of attention because there's this rise of social media and digital media. So the power of social connections are now trackable. So we can see how well people are connected. And in the world of social media, there's a lot of emphasis on influencers. And that's it. We talk about influencers. Thailand, the marketing community generally thinks about celebrities, bloggers, and so on. But to me, influencers are those people in your community, close to you, maybe your parent, maybe your close friend. They're the ones which are going to influence you the most. Social proof is another concept which is very prevalent in the digital world, and that is the idea that, is anyone familiar with social proof? Social proof is the idea that we look as social animals, we look for evidence of how other people are behaving, okay, to guide our own choice. So proof of what are the social norms, what's socially acceptable. So in the digital world, they use this a lot because it's quite easy to use. In a sense, you can see how many people have downloaded an app. You can see how many likes there are.
So viral marketing?
Viral marketing, in a sense, viral marketing only in the sense that you can see how many people are consuming a product. And that generates, so this is now deliberately used a lot in digital marketing. You show how many people, or what's going on, because in the digital world, you can't see what's being consumed. So you generate statistics and you present those statistics to consumers so they can use numbers to imagine a community of people using a particular product. So it's very extensively used in this digital marketing world. And so also behavioral economics, ways of nudging people to change their behaviors. You show how many people are using a positive form of behavior that you want others to follow. So you'll say, 9 out of 10 people do their tax returns on time. 9 out of 10 people in your town are doing their tax returns on time. You send that letter out to people, and that's much more effective than sending a threatening letter. People are much more responsive if they see that, oh, hang on, everyone else is doing it, behaving in this way. I should follow. So in the world of people heard about nudging, social proof is one of the main means of nudging. So it's sort of leveraging this idea of the herd mentality. People who engage in database marketing or CRM will know about customer engagement value. Okay? Kumar is the sort of leading sort of scholar in this field. And his original work, and so most database marketing companies, CRM companies, follow this idea. How to generate lifetime value. How to maintain a relationship with a customer and generate value from them in the long run. So that's a kind of direct form of value generation. However, in the new field of customer engagement work, these three elements are being added. It's indirect value generation. That's the value you get from customers making referrals, the value you get from customers influencing others through social media, and knowledge creation, which is this kind of co-creation of products. So there's a movement towards this recognition of the importance of social connection in business. And also, as we started off with, there's a strong recognition that stereotypes and these sort of fictitious stories we have about society need to be unpacked, deconstructed, and remade to generate a more sustainable future. So Unilever is leading the way in that regard. But you see a lot of brands now, especially in the last year, it's been very evident, especially I guess because of Trump, that a lot of brands are showing their social values. They're saying they're in favor of immigration even. They're saying they're in favor of multiculturalism. They're coming out in Australia at the moment where we've got this saying, you're going to say that? Brands are saying they're in favor of marriage equality.
That was going to be my question. What happens when a segment of your consumers do not share those values? Does that hurt a brand? Does that make brands and companies more cautious about stating their values?
I think, you can imagine it would, that they would be cautious. I think they would make a call on what's the majority. So you tend to see that they're going with the
crowd.
They're going with the crowd to some extent, but they're generally picking values which are going to generate a sustainable future for themselves. So they're thinking about what kind of society they want their brand to be part of. So yeah, brands are now become these political and social agents. I think there's a few questions we'll finish up with. Pathway questions to social sustainability. Businesses should be directed by values that align with social sustainability. I was just at a conference in Tokyo, Waseda University, on this very topic, on sustainability, and the Japanese scholars who have studied Japanese businesses for a long time, they're really frustrated at the moment with this startup culture. Okay, which might surprise some people. You're also pro-startups are changing the world. But the startup culture, from their perspective, is all driven by the business model. They don't talk about values.
Not always.
Not always.
There's a lot of social enterprises now
Yes.
that are very value driven.
Okay.
Value on
So there needs to
maybe
be...
not.
Again, they're not necessarily just talking about social enterprise. It's just the whole broad spectrum of sort of startups. Okay. And so do you see markets in a holistic, inclusive and socially connected form? Again, that's the way Vietnam was seeing. They were seeing how markets, people were connected. And they were looking at a market in an inclusive form. And we need to ask the question that Unilever is asked. What kind of narratives or stereotypes are we using to understand the market? And is there a disconnect between those stereotypes and the kind of social world we want to create? So that brings us to thought. Is the way you see and understand the market supportive of social sustainability and long-term value creation?
If you don't mind, one final question. Let's take Unilever as an example. How do we know whether what they're doing is driven by a genuine desire to sell some sort of values that they would like promoted in society, or they're doing it for the selfish reason of, establishing some sort of market differentiation and coming out on top? And second part of the question, does it matter?
Does it matter? Does it matter for them in terms of their business? Or does it matter, that distinction doesn't matter?
Yes,
I think it
the
does.
motivation matter.
I think motivation does count, because that's where your motivation is reflective of your values. And that will come through in the way you see the market, and the way that will sort of translate in how you then go about constructing it. So I think there's clear sort of connections there between your genuine values and the way you then go about dealing with the market. So I think even in Unilever there'll be a lot of friction between people in the company who are, hang on, this doesn't matter, we'll do it just out of marketing reasons. Well, that's what the CEO wants, it's not really going to be good for us. And so you might get a lot of friction like that. And so that's where it may not work. But I think coming from the CEO, that's the best way to change the values of the company. And so this is just a model for thinking about how to challenge the way you think. So I take this from a very sort of academic position. How do you expand the company's knowledge about a market? And that comes from the foundation of that is that reflexivity I talked about earlier, which is another way of talking introspection. Examining how you understand the market. Looking at your own vision of the market and challenging it, questioning it. So again, asking questions about the unknown. always trying to address the limits of your knowledge. This is the process of addressing a company's own ignorance, you could say. So it's a process of doing that, and you can sort of think about how to construct your own vision, sort of lay out all the different things that go into that come together to form how a company might think about the market. And I should put in here values. This is an old slide. Okay. And once you do that, you can then go about seeing what's outside my sphere of vision, what's outside my scope. And there'll be lots of things. Then you start addressing where all those things which sit outside of your scope, how they might fit, how they might be useful in terms of value creation, or how they might drive greater sustainability. Again, how do you understand consumer choice? How do you understand consumer needs? So all these things play a whole role in forming the general vision of consumer choice. There's lots of different things, but there are many things which generally fall out of that vision. Okay. So in another day, another workshop, we could work through some of this way consumers reconstruct yeah. We could work through how any given company or how your own business constructs your understanding of the market, and start to look at what might be outside of that scope. Okay, so I'm over time, but I'm happy to take questions now or afterwards, or you can certainly email me. I'm happy to discuss this topic in any capacity.
Last quick question.
Yeah.
Do you think the social sustainability and social responsibility is on most of the company thing are the same?
They look like people are using them interchangeably.
I mean, the approach and also measuring.
I think there is a movement towards referring to it as social sustainability. The way people actually engage in this concept is usually done sort of outside the business. It's not brought into the business itself or made fundamental to the business strategy. And it's certainly not sort of being implemented in terms of what I'm talking about here, in terms of how they construct and understand markets. So I think there's frankly, I did most of this research without even looking at sustainability, social sustainability, and the corporate social responsibility idea. I've mostly been very cynical about it, as it's mainly a marketing tool to promote company reputation. But I think that's changing. So there's a lot of companies which are trying to bring it into the way they conduct their business across the board.
I have a question about the line and the question.
Yeah.
Why does the line is so powerful in Thailand? Because other countries, Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea has a strong power of line. But that I can explain that that's neighbor country. But Thailand is not neighbor of Japan, Taiwan.
Line is popular in 3 countries mainly. It's owned by a Korean company, but it's not actually popular in Korea. Kakao and some other ones are popular in Korea. It's why messaging services become popular in different markets I still think is a mystery. Okay? Most of the time they become popular through network effects. So once you get a certain amount of penetration, everyone else will follow. So Line somehow gained that penetration, especially in Bangkok, and it's somehow affected the whole country. It might have something to do with Thais, like in the same way that Japanese do. They like cutesy things, so they love the emojis and the teddy bears and things like that. That might be a main reason. It's not that easy to explain. but what you see around the region. So the main, there's no correlation there's no connections in Southeast Asia. I think what you see in Thailand, it's Line. Myanmar, it's Viber. In Cambodia, it's FB Messenger. In Malaysia, it's WhatsApp. And so there are no connections here. Somehow something happened in each market, and because countries sort of, in a sense, are communities, they take over a whole country. You see that happening around the world. And how they get that, how they start off, is a very interesting question, and I would love to be able to give you a good answer.
Daniel, do you mind if you just go back to the slide back of new KPIs? Please. This one, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so yeah, the new KPIs, I think we should be looking at how brands appear in relationships. And this can be done through normal consumer research. You can ask someone what brands they use and what do their family members use. Is this a brand that your father also uses? Is that why you like this choice of beer? Something like that. There's many ways that you could go about doing it. You see it in social groups. I see it amongst peer groups. You see a group of students, they all have an Apple. You go see another group, and they all have another kind of model of phones. Strong influence by other people and their choices. So you can understand that through consumer research with simple questions.
Any other questions?
Anyway, you can send us the presentation. I think we do have a list of participants.
Need to ask the speaker.
Let me think about that.
Okay. Maybe just a selection of them.
Okay, that might be too well. I'll select a few slides. Then,
Maybe not others questions? Thank you very much, Dr. Daniel, for sharing with us great stories on social sustainability and some marketing strategies. And I hope you enjoy the sessions as much as I did. And you have a little token of appreciation for you.
okay.
Thank you. And I hope to see you again next time. Thank you. Oh, please. Don't forget to fill out the evaluation forms of the group
So it's good for measurement statistics and demographics.